Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Author Shelby Steele is the Robert J. and Marion E. Oster Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, where he studies race relations, multiculturalism, and affirmative action. Shelby's most recent book, published before November 4th, is entitled A Bound Man: Why We Are Excited About Barack Obama and Why He Can't Win. Shelby and I discussed this book earlier in the year. Needless to say, we have reason to discuss it again now. Segment 1 about that subtitle.
Now you've established my credentials as a prognosticator.
Why He Can't Win. Shelby, more than 64 million Americans voted for Barack Obama. He is now the 44th president-elect of the United States. Why did you expect him to lose? I want to lay out the argument of the book in a moment, but give me one sentence, if you can, on why you thought he couldn't win.
I thought he couldn't win. By the way, I didn't really argue inside the book that he wouldn't win, but I thought that he would have a difficult time winning because he never really revealed who he was, and I felt that the American people finally would want to know something about who he really was before they elevated him to the presidency.
All right. Let's go to the argument. In my judgment, the quick way of getting to the basic argument of the book is a tale of two trumpeters. Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis. Give us Louis Armstrong and why he's significant to your argument and to our understanding of the president-elect.
He's what I call a bargainer. When minorities enter the mainstream from which they have always historically been alienated, they wear a mask because they're at a natural disadvantage, and they try to present themselves in a way that angles for some advantage or other that allows them to succeed. So Louis Armstrong is a sort of classic example. Here's a poor kid from Louisiana, no father, so forth. But he has a certain genius in music.
Genius is the word.
Genius is the word. He transformed American music almost single-handedly. Well, what do? Do you stay behind the walls of segregation, or do you move out into the world? The world he met was a segregated world that did not want to give him any chance to do anything. He developed what I call the bargainer's mask, in which he basically, in his day, when segregation prevailed, he would stand before these all-white crowds at hotels where he could not himself stay, and he would bow a little bit, and he'd have a kind of exaggerated grin, and he'd put on this sort of humble mask, in effect making to them a kind of offer of inferiority, of saying, in a sense, if I'm not going to challenge you in any way, and in fact I'm going to offer you an image of black inferiority that goes along with your prejudice, if you will let me play my music. And
so Louis Armstrong, I think back to those old black and white, his appearances in those old movies in the 30s, and Louis Armstrong is implicitly saying, I know my place and I'm happy in it. Now that we've got that out of the way, listen to my music.
Right. He knew that
he's not necessarily telling the truth that he's happy in.
No, he's
that's
not.
What he's saying,
that's right.
So that he can get on to the question of his music.
That's right. That was his mask, and his mask. What made that bargain with whites? I'm not going to challenge you in your prejudice.
All right.
If you will, and America loved him. And bargainers are always loved.
He does get something in return for it.
He gets something in return. He got to become Louis Armstrong, and a well-loved figure in American life.
Miles Davis.
Well, history caught up with Louis Armstrong, and we after World War II and the rumblings of the Civil Rights Movement, America had changed, and so Miles Davis had exactly the opposite mask of Louis Armstrong. He came out on stage. He wouldn't speak to his audience. He would very often turn his back on his audience. If somebody spoke to him, he would glare at them with contempt, or he'd curse them out. And he knew that in the sophisticated world of New York jazz and so forth, he was dealing with whites who admired, who were proud to be in an audience. And as I say, I know people today who brag about being cursed out by Miles Davis. But again, the same sort of thing. I'm going to show you contempt for. I'm going to show contempt for that, and white liberals, particularly, who supported him as an artist, not just as a performer, but as an artist, had the feeling then that they were themselves above racism and they were beyond it because, after all, I'm a Miles Davis fan.
Louis Armstrong typifies the bargainer. Miles Davis, the challenger. Where's Barack Obama fit?
Barack Obama is an absolute, a to-the-manner-born bargainer who basically says, who takes the anxiety out of being white, who says to whites, I am not going to prejudge you as a racist if you will not hold my race against me. And whites are so thankful for that bargain, because white Americans today, as in the last 40 years since the civil rights victory, have been stigmatized as racist, have had to defend themselves, prove the negative, that they're not racist. Here comes a black who says, I'm going to take you off the hook. I'm not going to presume you're
And so,
racist.
Shelby, you argued when we sat down some months ago, when it seemed, frankly, as I recall, at that point, it was unlikely he'd win the primary, let alone the election. You had a strong form of the argument. Now that he's the president-elect, I want to see if you wish to stick with that. And you can correct me, but I believe I'm paraphrasing that argument correctly. That Barack Obama, the candidacy of Barack Obama, was not particularly about politics, the future of the country. It was about race, and above all, about making white folks feel good about what they had accomplished in the recent decades. You want to stick with that statement?
Absolutely, I stick with it. The only difference in my sort of feeling about these things today is that I underestimated. I wrote a book on white guilt, and I talk about the need in this book, the need of
this book, A Bound Man.
Yes, of white Americans to, because here's the thing: white America has made tremendous moral progress since the 60s, and I grew up in segregation. I know the difference. It is.
There is something worth celebrating,
and they've never given them. The white has never given themselves credit for that, and here is an opportunity at last to document this progress.
Right.